My name is Greene. I'm an American Military University student. I'm here today to talk to you about ethical training for police. Next slide, please. Some things that I will expand on today are my actual project proposal, the background of how I got here, a little bit of the research that I've done on this project, a sample of my findings, and a training plan proposal that I've come up with, and then I'll wrap up any questions, suggestions, or feedback that you may have for me. Next slide, please. So, what is a project without a proposal? Well, initially it just started off as brainstorming. So my first thought was, my concerns were police brutality and unethical behavior. Later on, I put a little bit more thought into it, and I thought, how and why are officers publicly facing a lot of negative spotlight in 2016? You see it all over the news and in the media right now. Later, that evolved into my project, which is that I think that officers need more extensive ethical training. Next slide, please. So, why did I choose this? Well, for part of my general studies program, I am required to do an interdisciplinary project. So I chose human resources and criminal justice. Like I was saying, criminal justice is of interest to me because I am concerned about police officers and their treatment today in 2016 in the media. In addition to that, I'm just curious about ethical behavior and their theories in general. And also, I have skills and interests in developmental training. As you know, I've been in the military, human resource manager for 17 years. So I have lots of interest in developing leaders, ethical training, and what it means to develop people. Next slide, please. Research. There was a lot of research thought out into this project. I did a lot of my research on the online campus library. Then I also used search engines like Google Scholar. And then I conducted my own methods of research through personal interviews. I did lots of literature reviews on the history and background of policing because I needed to know where policing came from and what was their initial methods of training. I also had to look in philosophy books to understand ethical theories and why people behave the way they do and where did that stem from. My collection of training, it was police interviews. I did this by contacting local police departments. I asked them a series of questions. Then I also looked at various journals and statistics on ethical behavior and the climate in workplaces. Then I looked at human resource management programs and how that they impact ethical behavior. I reviewed several books on training plans and how to develop successful training plans as well. Next slide, please. So this is just a sample of my findings. This is one example of the ethical behavior studies. As you can see here, when I reviewed some officers, 79% of them said that they follow ethical standards by the law, while only 6% of them admitted to using their judgment first and then the law as a secondary for making their ethical decisions. Next slide. But with any research, there is also contradictions. So as I did some research on ethical dilemmas, I found out that 70% of employees actually feel like they are pressured to make unethical decisions on the job, while only 30% said that they feel that they're not pressured at all to make unethical decisions. Next slide, please. That brought me to my police interviews. So I reached out to Georgia, Texas, Florida, and Louisiana, several officers. I made telephone calls, emails, and text. I did this. I made up a series of questions to ask them about their code of ethics in the law enforcement. Were they displayed? Did they know what they were? Did they receive any training on ethical behavior at all? Did they have any scenario-based training on ethical behavior? Then I wanted to know how many reported incidents did they have of unethical behavior, and how many unreported incidents were they aware of unethical behavior. Out of all of the departments, they all agreed that they had a code of ethics, that everyone knew where it was, and that it was displayed clearly for everyone to see. Then they all agreed, which I found interesting, that they do have ethics training, but it's only an annual requirement. It is not a scenario-based training. They don't have any scenario-based training once they leave the academy. And that is the only requirement they have at this time. Although they all agreed scenario-based training would enhance the productivity in their department. When I asked them about reporting incidents of unethical behavior of officers, a small percentage of them agreed that they have reported incidents and that those officers were held accountable. Unfortunately, there was a higher number of perceived unreported incidents of unethical behavior and officers were not held accountable. Next slide, please. The most interesting part of my findings that I thought was that 50% of officers actually have reported a decrease in their ethical views over a period of time. And this transition happened from the time that they started some of their first year. The occupational hazard, the fear of their life, their duty. But another portion of that has a lot to do with the older recruits influencing the newer recruits throughout their time at the academy and afterwards on what they believe the ethical standards of behavior should be. Next slide. So all of that together made me think that the training plan would be the best option to go. That is what I've handed out to you today that you have in front of you. This is my proposed training plan. The training plan consists of samples of scenario-based training. Now, I believe that the scenario-based training will replace the annual ethical training, and this should be done on a quarterly basis versus for training. The supervisors should be administering the training to the officers, and they should be making sure that they are held accountable. And if they are not completely successful in their training, that they should be remarking on that as well. In addition to that, the Human Resource Department should be very involved with the training plans of the police department, and they should be reviewing these training plans. There is a spot in there for them to sign off on the training as well. Next slide, please. I believe that this training plan proposal can be used by any human resource department and any police department anywhere. So I appreciate you taking your time to review these training plans, and then if you have any questions or feedback or suggestions for me, I'm open to any of that. I would also like to thank my mentor, Major James Roberts, for taking the time to be here today, and I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to hear my proposal today.